Hi, my name is Naomi DeWinter, and I serve as the president of Muscatine Community College, one of the sponsors for this beautiful luncheon. And it occurred to me that I must not look like what people think of as a president, because here's how my introductions usually go when I meet somebody new. So, I'm Naomi DeWinter. I'm with Muscatine Community College. The other person, oh, what do you teach there? Me, I actually don't teach anything. I serve as the president. And then the other person, really? Wow. So I'm not quite sure how to interpret that, like really wow moment. It's either, I expected something different, right? I expected maybe to see a man in that role, or like, do they let anybody be the president these days? So we'll never know the answer to that. But I want to tell you the story of how I became the president of Muscatine Community College. And it involves a good friend of mine, my former boss, whose name is Cameron. I really looked up to her, and my daughters had a chance to get to know Miss Cameron also. She's about 10 years older than I am, and a big Michigan State University fan. So I lived in Michigan for a long time. So Michigan, University of Michigan, and Michigan State University is like Iowa and Iowa State University. So one of the spikes that I remember about Cameron is that she had an acute sense of right and wrong. She would always talk about feeling it in her gut if something was right or wrong. And sometimes she would override that feeling, kind of the head over heart, situation, and it never worked out. So she would always say, I should have listened to my gut. And she hired me for a job in Michigan when I was in my late 20s. And I remember one time, she really ticked me off. She made me upset. And I don't recall the specifics, but I recall the emotions that I felt. It had something to do with, she was questioning my judgment about a certain situation. And maybe she was wrong and I was right, or maybe she was right and I was wrong. I don't remember, but I was so angry and frustrated. I remember going into my office, and maybe some tears even came out, because it was just like that kind of moment. And Cameron knew that I was not happy here. So before too long, she came into my office, she shut the door, she sat down, and she apologized. And I accepted her apology. And that was it. There was never any lingering, strange feelings between her and I after that moment. We never had a moment like that again. We trusted each other completely from that day on. And Cameron is the reason I'm now the president at Muscatine Community College. We were attending a conference together. She was already a president, and I was a vice president, and we were listening to a great dynamic speaker. And they were talking about, we really need good leaders at community colleges because of all the challenges that are coming down the road. And Cameron leaned over to me and she said, you would be a great president. It was the first time I had ever thought about that, like, what? And her comment, though, made me start thinking about those questions. And then her support as I prepared for the presidency are the reasons that I stand before you today. So my mentor is Miss Cameron. And I asked myself questions. Do I really want to be a president? Do I want to stay in the job that I was in right now? What would things be looking like 5 years from now? Would I still be challenged in my job? And while I think I would have been happy actually still doing what I was doing, a part of me started to become curious about that new challenge. And I had faith in the opportunity that was starting to present itself to me. I had faith that Cameron saw something in me that I didn't see. And I had faith that there would be growth and opportunity with new people in a new place. And those new people and that new place is right here in Muscatine, Iowa. So today we welcome our special guest, Shalimar Adorno, to Muscatine, Iowa. We're so delighted to have her here. I'll say some introductory remarks so you can get to know her interesting and amazing story, and then Shalimar and I will have some time to ask some questions of her, and then hopefully, if time permits, we'll also field some questions, especially from the students who are here today. So Shalimar Adorno is Assistant Vice President at Global Infrastructure Partners, where she serves as a senior advisor to the firm's vice chairman. From 2015 until 2019, Shalimar served as the Senior Operations Officer and Special Assistant to the President of the World Bank Group, where she oversaw the daily operations of the President's Office and supervised all support staff, as well as a team of 10 deputized executive protection security agents. Shalimar recently wrote a chapter in the book that you have in Renee Carrawell's new best-selling book, Spike, a guide to strength-based leadership for executives and leaders across industries. In her chapter titled Have Faith and Opportunities, she shared moments of triumph, despair, and faith from her life and career, which received critical acclaim for its authenticity and lessons for success. A native of New York City, Shalimar previously worked at the Cisneros Group Family Office, Jefferies Group, and UBS Investment Bank, where she cultivated her ability to advise and work with principals from senior executives to heads of state. At the World Bank Group, Shalimar developed a trusting and confidential relationship with the president, which helped transform his operations within the organization. Prior to Shalimar's appointment, the president was routinely bogged down with immediate tactical issues, leaving less time for broader strategic challenges. Shalimar designed and implemented new systems to execute all of the president's tactical issues and requests, allowing him more time to deal with the structural issues of development and engage with key stakeholders, both within and outside of the bank group. Shalimar holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Spanish from Pennsylvania State University, holds a certification in leadership and organizational development from New York University, and is currently completing an executive leadership coaching degree at Georgetown University. Shalimar, please join me up here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Think I have the song?
Thank you for being in Muscatine, Iowa, Shalimar.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here, truly. Thank you. It's a privilege.
Well, please, let's start by you telling us about yourself. I told just a snapshot, I think, of your career and the highlights. But tell us about yourself and where you are now.
So I was born and raised in the Bronx in New York. Have you guys ever heard of the Bronx? Anybody here? You have? Okay. Oh, great. I'm not that far from home. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, and my mom was 16 when she had me. She was 17 by the time she gave birth to me. And I was raised in, in a really, really loving household with my grandmother and my 3 crazy uncles that took turns going in and out of prison. And I often share that, we really didn't realize what we didn't have growing up, because all of us, it wasn't like we had less than our neighbors or our neighbors had more. It was, we all sort of understood that what we had in front of us was all to be had at the time. And so I was raised in a household where there was a lot of chaos, a lot of, toxicity, and a lot of drugs, and a lot of uncertainty about what life really had to give and what it had to bring. And so the fact that I'm even sitting here with all of you today is just so improbable, right? Because I don't know that I could have ever dreamed the dream of thinking I could ever even get to college, or that I could ever really land a job that was purposeful, that was meaningful. And so, as you mentioned earlier, I currently work in a private equity space where I support Dr. Jim Kim. And before that, I worked at the World Bank Group with him, where we really focused on trying to end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity. And just for those that may not be sure, extreme poverty is anyone who lives on $1.35 a day or less all along the world, right? And so when you think about the upbringing that I had, I was raised on public assistance, you know, my parents were always on welfare. The chances that I would then end up working and running the president's office at a place like the World Bank Group, where that was our focus, was like a dream come true.
So why do you choose to share your story? And what do you hope others, like the girls and women in our audience today, will take from your experiences?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize that I had a story to tell, right? I think that we don't often give ourselves permission to really take up too much space in the world, right? And so I didn't realize that there was a story to tell. When Renee Carriol, who wrote the book and who's my mentor and confidant, he set me aside and said, you know, Sham, I want to add a story into the book of a strong woman, and and I thought he was just asking for the purposes of us putting our thinking caps on and for me to help him sort of figure out who that was. We came up with a few names. He goes, no, I would really like for you to write the story. And I was a bit taken aback, just because I didn't realize that there was a story to tell, right? I then proceeded to tell him, look, I'm not a writer. I don't know how to write. This is just not what I think I'm good at. And he didn't take no for an answer. And what I understand today, and I didn't realize then, was that he believed in me in a way that I obviously didn't believe in myself, right? And I think that's when the journey of me really sharing my story and where I come from started. And so when I started to write the chapter, he gave me 48 hours to get him a draft. So not only am I not a writer, and I don't think I have a story, but now I have 48 hours before I get on the plane to go to Indonesia. But what I actually found was that I found it like really therapeutic. Suddenly, speaking about some of these memories that I thought had been buried just kind of rose to the surface. I spoke really open and honestly about what my life had been, because I think seldom times we walk into to a room like I walked in today, and I'm not sure that most people who see me would think that that may be a part of my story, right? That I understand what it is to be hungry. I understand what it is not to have somewhere to live. I know what it is not to have clothing to wear. And so although I sit here today and I may have a role that, and I get to travel the world and I get to support someone who's considered a head of state, there's so much more to me than that. That's actually not the most exciting thing about this. This is why for me it's such a privilege to be here, even sharing with each of you, because I certainly didn't have this experience when I was your age. And I really wish that I had. And so I think the goal is that, that hopefully in me sharing some of my story, that some of you feel that you can give yourself permission to share your story as well, because each of us has a story. And we don't need to ask permission to share it. We just have a story. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah. Wonderful, yes. You have mentioned in the story that you wrote in 48 hours that education was the light of your life. Why did you say that?
So, again, because I grew up in an environment where there was so much chaos going on. I mean, my parents did the best that they could to ensure that we felt loved and that we had that we had as much as they could give us. But the truth is that wasn't always enough, right? And I write in the book about how when we lived in Atlanta, there were a few days had gone by that we hadn't eaten. And we couldn't get up from the floor, with the exception of my younger brother, who at the time was about 6 months old. he had formula, but we didn't have any food to, to eat. And so when I think about, even back then, I remember that I chose to focus on school because I think at the time I felt like it was the one thing that I could control around me, right? And when I would see people on TV and I'd see that they seemed so much larger than life, I wondered as a child, like, how do these people even get there? Like, are these like unicorns? Like, how do people actually make it there? Because I felt stuck as a child, right? I didn't know that there was something else to be had, right? I didn't know anyone around me. I was the first person to actually graduate from high school in my family. So I pivoted and I always focused on my studies. That kind of came easy to me. Not really knowing what the end result of that would even be. But thinking back, I guess there was an inkling that I had that although it was the only thing that felt like I could sort of control, it was also my ticket to really understanding sort of the world, the bigger world that was out there.
I think what we're hoping to do with pairing up the middle school students with the leaders in our community is to provide that ongoing mentorship and looking to someone who is in a role of responsibility and leadership and understanding what it will take to get there. Yeah. So your title or the title of your chapter is called "Having Faith in Opportunities." And could you talk a little bit further about what that means to you, having faith in opportunities?
Yeah. So in the book, I write about my Aunt Carmen. She was actually my mom's aunt. She was 20 years older than my mother's mother, my grandmother. And she was a tough cookie. But she was also a devout Catholic. And so she never had children of her own. And so she invested quite a bit of time in making sure that I understood that for every action, there's an equal reaction. That, it was important to her that I indeed had a relationship with the guy upstairs, that I understood that, that we didn't just show up on this earth, right? And so that has been at the core of my life. And I venture to say that because of the faith that I have and because of the notion that I've never felt alone in this world, even though at times we've had really sort of horrific things happen to us. I've certainly had experiences that have felt like they've almost killed me just because I've been so devastated. I have always felt like there was going to be a purpose for whatever was happening. I always choose to look for the lesson in whatever it is that I'm experiencing at the time. And that's really allowed me to see things through from inception to end and not necessarily give up. And so when I thought about, what the common thread in the chapter was, it is my faith. I have faith that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I couldn't have dreamed again that I would ever end up here speaking to each of you and sharing a story. But I'm grateful to the bone that I do have the opportunity to do that.
So your positivity, I think, has already come out in the answer that you just gave, but can you talk about how you have kept your positive attitude and drive throughout some trying times, for yourself and also just trying times globally?
Yeah, I have to say that it wasn't always that way. I didn't always feel very positive about the circumstances I was in. As a matter of fact, as I was growing up, it was really hard. I didn't feel like I really fit in. I used to joke sometimes with my family and ask them if I was adopted just because I felt like I just don't relate to anyone at home. Or even in the family, not so much at home. But I just felt like an outsider almost looking in. I felt stuck a lot of the times because, again, the common theme was that we didn't have, right? There was a lot of humility in the fact that, that we had a place to live. But sometimes that also wasn't on the table, right? So when there's so much uncertainty, it really chips away at your sense of self. It chips away at at any hope that you could have for a different future. which is actually what I was experiencing when I was in Atlanta, and we didn't have food, right? And because we had just moved into a new apartment, we didn't have any furniture. And some of you guys might see that when you buy new appliances, they have like, they show you the amazing turkey that you can make in a brand new oven or in the microwave, you know. And my mom and I remember vividly, I was 13 at the time, we would look at these brochures and we were so hungry, and all we could do is dream about the food that we wanted to eat, right? But I also understand today, looking back, that I understood that there had to be a reason for all of these experiences. And the way that my life has sort of played out and the roles that I've had, it's allowed me to identify with our constituents better. You know, when I would get off of an airplane, and obviously we were flanked by security and we're met by a whole zoo of other security people. For most people, that's like really exciting, and it's impressive, and you feel like you've arrived. For me, it was completely different. I wanted to get to the hotel fast enough to then get into the various offices that we were visiting, to speak to the staff and really understand from their point of view, so where are the gaps? How can I be of service? Because I actually work with the president of the World Bank Group. Being able to hire some of that talent and bring them into Washington, D.C. I mean, that made all the difference, not just for them, but for their entire families, right? So I think that a long life, when I try and think back to what the thread has been, is that there hasn't been an opportunity that's been lost on me, even coming here, right? Every time I get on a plane and I'm going to visit a new country, I never dreamed that I could afford to go to a new country. I didn't dream that I'd be able to speak other languages, or that I could be in the presence of people that are really sort of in charge with making sure that our world sort of pivots in the right direction. So yes, today I could see it from a different lens, but it's definitely been a journey that's allowed me to arrive there.
So as you described the scene about having security, you know, meet you here and then meet you there, some people, me included, would think, wow, you know, I'm so important that they have to have security, right? So I've arrived, I'm successful, but how do you measure success, and what is most important to you about the work that you do today?
Part of the reason that I felt like I could work the 14 or 16-hour days that I worked at the World Bank Group was because I felt that we were actually creating an impact. So success is really, did I go to work and was I able to move the needle? Did I make a difference in someone's life? And if so, how? And how do we not make that, you know, how do we turn that into not just a day's event, but how do we create environments and opportunities for folks so that they too can feel like they can step themselves outside of some of the dire circumstances that they feel that they're in. But I think it's an ongoing journey. I don't know that I've ever arrived at it, even when something has been successful. I don't know that I can categorize something as success, because, you know, with every day comes new experiences. There's always going to be something, right, that we have to deal with, and how we deal with those things that turn up and that we don't necessarily plan for. I think that's really important, because I think everyone can ride with you in the limo when things are going well. It's when things aren't going so well. And I can promise you that at the bank, there were so many things that didn't go well, right? And so we had people in place to ensure that we mitigated those, but we still had to deal with the folks that we had entrusted and that then decided to do something else, maybe with funding that we gave them. We would give funding to maybe a particular country, and suddenly you saw that the person we gave money to decided to build themselves a really nice house, and the school was never built, right? And so we still have to deal with that in some way. So yeah, I think of success in that way.
I think sometimes success you can't see right away, right? And I imagine a lot of the projects that you worked on, it's not like at the end of the week you're going to see some changes. So
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those longer term?
Sure. No, that's actually a great point. So, for example, when I arrived at the bank, we had a team that I realized that there were some gaps, meaning that some folks had been in the role for a long time, and so they had fallen what's called culturally lagged. There were some things that they were really good at, and there were other things that they just weren't willing to budge or to learn new ways. The bank has a 3% attrition rate, so new talent doesn't just come in. I was actually recruited while I was in New York to come and move to DC, so I didn't know that the job even existed, right? So one of the things that I can see today that maybe I wasn't as aware of then is that when we started onboarding the team that we knew we needed in order to really sort of carry out the work that not just the president's office needed to carry out, but that they were deserving of, and that would allow, in this case, the president to show up with the best information so that he can then make the best decisions. When I see the team that we hired then, and we talk about some of the things that they learned, how to have tough conversations, how the fact that when you say no, no is a full sentence. You don't need to explain no, right? Or, that they were able to stand up for themselves, especially as women. I find that most of them today will raise their hand and they will ask for the raise, or they will ask for that promotion. And if their talent isn't appreciated, they will take their talent somewhere else. And that is something I'm extremely proud of. Because these are women that came from countries where they did not have a voice, where they weren't allowed to have an opinion. And so they could have easily decided that was just going to be the rest of their life, right? And so somewhere along the line, some of the experiences we had, the support that we obviously shared, has really sort of empowered them to feel like, no, wait a second, I'm in charge of my career. And so because I'm in charge, I'm going to pivot accordingly.
How are the friends and people you choose to surround yourself with important in your life?
That's an excellent question. So I'm obviously really intentional about the people that I keep around me. I think that you do yourself a disservice when you can't be honest about who you really are. So for example, my closest friends in the world are my friends that I went to Penn State with, right? And these are folks that I can call at 2 a.m. I can call Renee at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? These are my 2 a.m. calls. When you think about moments when you're brought to your knees and you don't know if you can get up the next day, right? But these are people that I realize that the reason the relationships that I have with them, the bond that we have is so strong, has a lot to do with how we each show up. So for example, my brother Mike was murdered, brutally murdered, when I was 17 and he was 18. And a year later I went on to Penn State, and that was I started my journey with going to therapy. And I speak really openly about this when I give talks or when I'm interviewed, because I think it's important to really democratize therapy. If you break your ankle, you're going to go to the doctor to figure out, how to heal your ankle, right? And for some reason, we haven't gotten around to when you don't feel well, when you're depressed, when you're anxious, or when you don't always know what you're feeling, 9 times out of 10, we just decide that we're just going to keep it in a cone and we're not going to talk about it. And so I have relationships where I choose to show up authentically and speak about those things. I've called my friend John in times when, I've had to decide over my aunt's life, my Aunt Carmen's life, and they were like, do you want to should we just slowly let her go, or how do we do that? And to have people, who I can be honest with is really important. And that especially the mental health piece, because I think that it's also allowed them to be honest about something's not right. I'm not feeling like myself. And whether it's helping to find a therapist, whether it's being their therapist, even though you don't always feel qualified, just being able to show up in a way that really serves your purpose in life, but that also serves that relationship. So, as you evolve in life, you figure out what you need and what you can do without. And so certainly I have a lot of people in my life, and I'm fortunate for that. But there's some people whose life goals aren't aligned with mine, and you don't need to live the life that I lead. But to me, it's important that I surround myself with folks that are inspiring me, that I'm learning from them. You know, there's this saying that says if you're not inspired by the 5 people that you surround yourself with, you're not in a circle, you're in a prison. And I believe that. Like, I want to be able to learn from you and for us to learn from each other. It's kind of even like with mentoring. A lot of folks think that the mentor is the one that's sort of, you know, just sort of steering the relationship, and that, no, it's a two-way street. The same way that you can mentor me, I'm hopeful that you can learn something from me as well.
Well, speaking of mentors, in the book you reference Tanya, whom you met at St. Michael Academy, and the importance of her as a mentor. How was this relationship impactful? And why would you encourage everyone here today to find their own mentor?
Yeah, Tanya was a huge light in my life. Tanya, at the time I met her, I had gotten a scholarship to an all-girls school in New York, and with the scholarship, someone paid for you to go to school. My parents couldn't afford that. And then, of course, it came with someone who was like a sponsor, and it was her. So she was my mentor. I met her when I was 14, and I have a relationship with her still. I felt seen by Tanya. Tanya was also Puerto Rican. She was raised, you know, by a single mom. And, you know, she made me feel that anything was possible, right? And I think that was the first time that I felt like there could be an option in my life for more. Because one thing is for me to go to school and get good grades, but you don't always know what the cathedral looks like. And when I think about my cathedral, I think about, you know, if I could wave a wand, what would my ideal life look like, right? It was the first time, it was an experience that really allowed me to dream much bigger than I had ever sort of allowed myself to dream. And so she would go on to be someone who played a huge role in me even getting to college. I needed $1,000, like the aid wasn't gonna match up and I didn't have enough money to actually, you know, get to school. And she was like, well, you're just not gonna not go to college because you don't have $1,000, right? So having a mentor has, and I've had several mentors along my life, you know, is another way of me thinking about the amount of people who have invested in me, right? So I don't wake up every day and just think about me. I think about the investments that people have made in me. And so each of us here is a compilation of many, many different efforts by many different people, right? And how you choose to honor those people makes all the difference, right? And so Tanya, Renee, Dr. Kim, these are all people that I've learned quite a bit from, but more importantly, they have, in essence, allowed me to really lean in at the table.
I'm going to ask for any questions from the audience before I ask my final question of Shalimar. Yes, please. I think the question was, what was the first step in your journey to becoming what you are today? Is that correct? Okay.
I'm sorry, so what's your name? I'm so sorry.
Johanna.
Johanna, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. So with any sort of big transformation in life, they usually come about by many hundreds of tiny, imperceptible steps that we take along the way. So I would say that from the moment that I decided that I wanted a different life, that's when slowly but surely I took steps towards my quote-unquote cathedral that I was talking about. You know, if I'm honest, I think that when I was at the World Bank Group, I interviewed for a job working for who I work for, who I still work with, I knew that job was gonna change not just my own economic standing, but for my family, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just been sort of a thread of a lot of different sort of pivots in life that I just knew that I was gonna back myself up. If I couldn't do it, then I don't know who could, because I knew that I really believed that I could do anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. How about a question from this side of the room? Yes. How did you deal with all the tough parts of your life? Is that correct? Okay. And what's your name? Alexis?
Alexis, thank you for that question. Oh, that's a good question. I think that every different situation that happened taught me something different. In truth, I didn't always feel like I knew how to deal with them. Sometimes I felt like I was stuck and that I didn't really have anyone to maybe run to that could be a safe haven for me. But my faith in knowing that I was a good person, that I deserved better in life, and then that I wasn't going to give up until I got there, I think that really allowed me to just kind of hang on tight, because I knew it was going to be an interesting ride, even though I didn't know what the end result was going to be. And if I'm honest, I still do that today in some of the things that, that we experience, right? Because the issues are always there. It's how we manage ourselves in the context of those issues. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask you very briefly, what are 3 pieces of advice you want us to always remember from being here today?
Okay, so the first piece would be that, God is not going to give you the dream and then not give you the ability to carry that dream out. I promise you. He's not going to give you a dream and then not give you the ability to carry that dream out. Right? Another piece of advice would be, make sure that you take on the tough jobs. You take them on, you raise your hand, you take on the jobs that nobody wants, and you do it with a smile, with the assumption that someone is always watching. The fact that I'm even here with you guys is a divine intervention, because I couldn't have planned it out that way, right? And back yourself up. No one can run your race better than you, meaning no one can be a better you than you. And see, each of us was put in this world to carry out a purpose that only you can carry out. And so the moment that you align with whatever your purpose in life is, you become unstoppable. You become untouchable. No one can mess with you. So the goal is to figure out what you came into this world to do. Make sure you get a mentor while you're at it.
Will you be my mentor? Everyone, please help me thank
Shalimar brought us powerful words, powerful kindness, and powerful passion. It was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to talk a little bit as we've got some notes just to close, but one thing I wanted to tell you, I kind of inadvertently created a relationship with Shalimar through work, and all remotely until last night when I got to meet her for the first time. But interestingly enough, in those short conversations, she became a friend and a mentor. And that sounds odd, right? We had short conversations, but what I could see in her is she has a heart for helping others. And I deeply respect that, and I appreciate that. And so I was able to learn from her in those short moments that she was able to share with me. And I think it's important for us to talk about, it's important for us to talk about how that helping heart kind of defines all of our lives. So I want to I'm going to stop and thank Kim Warren, who started this afternoon, for her words. Kim is a mother and a daughter and a friend, and she's a really good nonprofit leader. And she works really hard to make sure kids have an opportunity for education, whether they're very young or they're older, and we appreciate her work. I want to thank Dr. Naomi DeWinter, who also is a mom and a sister and a friend, and is a really good community college president, thanks to Carmen, right? All on the roots of Carmen. Now, I didn't say she was a good mom, because her children are here, and I'm going to ask, how is she as a mom? kind of, oh, thumbs up, yeah. I knew that was going to happen because she's their ride home, I think, so they didn't have any choice. But Dr. DeWinter is a really good president of a college because she cares about education. She cares about reducing barriers and creating an environment that allows students and adults to learn. And also, and I say this often, when she sees a space that she can change to make it better for someone to have more opportunities, she doesn't fast forward. Because she realizes we don't all have the luxury of time. And she works very hard at that. Now I do want to ask, we've got some adult women in the room. How many of you are MCC, went to MCC for even a little bit? Do we have some? All right, ladies, we got a lot of MCC alum in the room. So thank you to MCC for the difference they make for today and into the future for leadership. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Shalimar because she brought an incredible story today. And she also is a daughter and a sister and a niece and a good friend to all that are fortunate enough to know her. And I think it's interesting, she speaks 4 languages. She speaks English, she speaks Spanish, she speaks Portuguese, and she speaks love. Because love is a language, ladies, and she lives it every single day. You can hear through her stories how much she deeply cares about others succeeding. When she shares her stories, she does that, and she shares her love through lots of different ways, on almost every aspect of her life. So she travels the world, helping improve the lives of others. She takes classes so she can learn how to be a coach to help others succeed. And then just on a day-to-day basis, she's a good friend, and she shares her kindness and her faith with all that she knows. So she lives it every moment of every day. Now I think all 3 of these folks that I just mentioned epitomize success in my mind because they lead with integrity. And they live their values in every aspect of their life. And I think that truly is success. And so I commend all 3 of you for that. I thank Shalimar. She commuted quite a ways to get here to Washington, D.C. And I was feeling like you might have a one, but we have a couple other people that commuted in for today's luncheon. Judy Holdorf came all the way from Arizona, and Rebecca Howe came in from Atlanta. Are there others in the room that made a short commute to get here today? Okay, ladies, this was an important luncheon because we had people coming from all over the nation to join us. So thank you. What's that?
Even Costa Rica.
Costa Rica's the winner, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Thank you for joining us today. And I started to say gentlemen, but we do have 1 or 2 in the room. So ladies and gentlemen, the winner. All right. I want to thank Lindsay, and I'm not sure where she's at, and Ciara, and I want to thank Jamie, who's sitting in the room, and Vivian. So they have been simply incredible getting ready for this week's activities. We have a really busy week, and the teamwork that I get to experience at the Community Foundation is unparalleled. And hopefully, as many of you get older and get an opportunity to work, you get to work in an environment like I do. So I'm thankful for that. I will tell you, the Community Foundation, the impact would be considerably less if it wasn't for these folks, because they care and they're passionate, and they bring that every day to make a difference for our community. So thanks to them. So I agree with Shalimar. I think it's the people that come into your lives have a profound impact on who you are, and I very much mean that. And so I encourage you to find your heroes. And as Kim indicated earlier, I have many heroes in this room that have worked really hard to try to make me better and been supportive and helped me along the way. So ladies, do look for your heroes. They will make a difference in your life, and they will shape who you become. I want to thank the Merrill. We had an outstanding place to gather and amazing food, I believe. So a round of applause for the Merrill. I want to thank each of you that took time to be here, both the adult ladies that had to carve a little time out of your day, your priorities to join us. And I want to thank the young ladies who also took a little time out of their day away from your friends and away from your schoolwork. And I'm sure that you want to get back to your schoolwork, so we'll let you do that soon, but we appreciate your time. I also want to thank the folks that served as the chauffeurs to allow the ladies to join us today. They're sitting at the back table, so we appreciate that as well. In a few minutes, we're gonna take some group photos, and the photographer over here, his name is Dan. Again, he's one of the two guys or dudes in the room hanging out with us today. Dan's okay hanging out with a bunch of ladies though, because he actually has a wife and 2 girls at home, so he never gets to be around other guys, right? So this is normal for you. So we appreciate, Dan will be helping us with that. I want to end by noting that the way we spend our time defines who we are. And so I want you to think about yesterday and think about how you spent your time. And did you spend time in a way that shows what you truly prioritize? You know, we have to stop and think at how we spend our time show what we value. Does it show we value education? Does it show we value our family? Does it show we value our friends? Does it show we value our faith? Does it show we value our passion? And often the answer is we didn't spend our time that way, right? Often we make excuses and say, well, you know what, I can't get to it today. So we get comfortable, right? And we get into our routine and we don't try to show what we value. And also we make excuses for ourselves to not be motivated to reach our dreams. Because sometimes it allows us to not take a step forward that might feel uncomfortable. Like Shalimar talked about, sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to step forward. So ladies, I believe we've heard today that no road is blocked from what you want to achieve. And I think often the only thing standing in our way is ourselves. So you have to step aside and allow yourself to reach, to go, to work toward the enjoyment, to work toward the opportunities. And don't forget that no path is straightforward. Often there's going to be bumps along the road. And all that does is when you finally achieve it, it lets you appreciate it even more. So as Shalimar said, it's not always an easy path, but you got to keep moving. And as long as you keep moving, you're getting closer and closer. So I ask you to look at your day. It paints a picture of what you value, and make sure that aligns with what you want to have show that your values are. And in the words of a friend, have faith in opportunities. Thank you.